Hi, everybody. My name is Matt, and I had the pleasure of working with Frank Wood and Mari Godinez. And our entry into the 21st century history book will be about blockchain technology. Simply put, blockchain is a ledger that keeps track of all records, transactions, or events in an ecosystem and then distributes that ledger amongst all participating users. A blockchain does not necessarily need to be digital, as we will see an example of on the next slide. However, moving forward, the digital version of a blockchain, now referred to as blockchain technology, will come to be the main focus. The information transferred on the blockchain or digital ledger is encrypted and recorded. But before that transaction or block is recorded, it is shared with everyone else participating in the blockchain network. These participants then have a chance to review that transaction or block before adding it to the digital ledger or blockchain. This review process is actually a key to what a blockchain actually attempts to accomplish. By sharing each transaction with all active participants, the process becomes decentralized, where the ledger is not held accountable to any one central authority. Once encrypted, the next block is added to the chain, and now anyone attempting to alter previous transactions would be required to not only alter the target block, but also every block that came before it. All this is needed to maintain continuity of the blockchain without being detected, because now each new block is connected to each and every block that came before it. And then the true power of the blockchain comes once the blockchain grows substantially in length, because the more blocks on a chain, the more secure the system becomes, making an alteration effectively impossible. So for this part of the presentation, we're going to offer you the opportunity to pause now and take a look at a brief timeline and overview of the history of the evolution of blockchain technology. At the tail end of the 80s, Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetta joined forces to solve a problem that no one really knew existed. As records and data were just beginning to rapidly move online, Haber and Stornetta were worried that there would be no way to authenticate and certify the transition of data from a physical form to a digital form. And their solution was to take every transaction or grouping of files to be uploaded and assign them a digital fingerprint. Then each week, every digital fingerprint would be chained together and hashed using a cryptographic function to create a single block. And subsequently, that alphanumeric block was published every Sunday in the Lost and Found section of the New York Times. Before the internet was widely utilized, these men had created a viable blockchain. Each week, copies of this newspaper were printed all around the world and stored in libraries and archives all around the country. And by keeping this physical copy of newspapers all across the country in different locations, the idea paved the way for a digital version of the same concept, a decentralized blockchain. Not until 2008 did one person, choosing to remain anonymous, publish their thesis on a peer-to-peer cash transfer system using blockchain technology. He or she, going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, wanted to simplify the way payments are made in the digital space. After the financial crisis in 2008, Satoshi realized that allowing for centralized banks and bureaucrats to have control over the entire financial system may have been the very cause that led to the events that led to the crisis. But that in itself, the financial crisis, is a topic for another video. So Satoshi proposed a solution to streamline payments in the growing e-commerce space. Here she explained a system where the burden of proof and trust was on the community using the system rather than any centralized entity. The community would essentially race for rewards dished out for solving an increasingly difficult mathematical problem, and solving of that problem thus maintain the integrity of the blockchain. In addition to being rewarded for solving the problem, you would also create that next block in the chain. And the existing chain would then be checked against the newest iteration of the blockchain by the entire community that stores the chain on their systems at home or wherever that may be. However, Satoshi did identify one major potential downside, and that's noted in their paper, and that's what is referred to as a 51% attack. And in this case, the blockchain could be compromised because if at any time the ledger is controlled by a 51% majority, the blockchain is no longer decentralized, therefore allowing for manipulation by the majority controlling party.
Starting in 2009, a group of programmers got together to work on the first major breakthrough that would be using blockchain technology. Adam Back, Hal Finney, Craig White, Satoshi Nakamoto, and a few others began the process of turning Satoshi's ideas from their white paper into a reality. These early programmers for the Bitcoin blockchain shared a common distrust for centralized banking systems, and that sense of distrust had only been heightened after the 2008 financial crisis. They thought it could revolutionize the world of finance if they could successfully create a decentralized banking ledger. So their overall goal was to separate government from currency, and at the time, they wanted to create a form of currency that could be transferred anywhere in the world in a matter of minutes. Their idea was, in some ways, was a social experiment and raised the question, would the world allow for an unregulated currency to exist? In the next slide, we'll talk about the mysterious disappearance of Satoshi Nakamoto. So, Satoshi's group utilized PC World's forum to communicate back and forth. And one of Satoshi's last messages he left, he basically left a very ominous message to the rest of the team. And this had to do with the publicity they were getting after WikiLeaks dumped a bunch of data on their platform. So Satoshi knew that the nascent blockchain he and his online friends created had one major flaw, and that was the possibility of a 51% attack that could indeed compromise the blockchain. Shortly after, the Bitcoin blockchain was in the mainstream media, and Satoshi subsequently disappeared, leaving behind his roughly 1.8 million Bitcoins that still remained untouched to this day. So currently, at the time of this presentation, those Bitcoins would be worth about roughly $80.1 billion. So some people have speculated as to what had happened, but there's really no single answer to the question. What happened to Satoshi? The easy answer is that Satoshi had passed away and is no longer with us. However, there is a theory that's gaining popularity that suggests that Satoshi stepped away because of his severe distrust for the government and the assumption that the new publicity would certainly be followed by government probes. He disappeared that way. So, and finally, the most honorable theory suggests that Satoshi completely abandoned their Bitcoin holdings, understanding that any one person being connected to Bitcoin would effectively render Bitcoin centralized, defeating the one main purpose, which was to create a decentralized ledger. So in 2013, Vitalik Buterin was inspired by Bitcoin, but he noticed that Bitcoin was limited in their capabilities. So he wanted to add a layer of scripting on top of the blockchain to expand and incorporate programmable apps. However, when he proposed the idea to Bitcoin, they were like, no, no way, man. So this led to Buterin to publish his white paper that outlined his idea he called Ethereum later in the same year. So this would capture the attention of Anthony Delorio, Charles Hoskinson, Mihai Alisi, and Amir Chedfrit. Uh, so basically, with the team assembled, the developmental stage could begin. So to start gaining attention to the project, the core team attended the North American Bitcoin Conference. Kind of ironic that Ethereum decides they're going to uh, announce themselves at the Bitcoin conference. And this was in Miami in 2014. But, anyways, this would attract 3 developers to the team. These guys were Joe Lubin, Gavin Wood, and Jeffrey Wilk. In order to fund the project, Buterin and his team organized a crowdfunding campaign which would give their newly minted cryptocurrency, Ether, to their contributors. So this campaign would end up raising $18 million. $18 million, guys. So now we'll talk about the execution and the phase planning of Ethereum. In July of 2015, the team began the Frontier phase, and this was the official launch of Ethereum 1.0. Essentially, the team wanted to create 2 basic functions, which was to allow their users to mine Ether and run smart contracts on the platform. However, in April of 2016, there was a security vulnerability that was discovered when the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, or DAO, was created. So in response, Ethereum rolled out the Homestead phase, which was the safer platform and was their answer to address the security issues. Unfortunately, this meant they had to create a separate fork of their platform, which we'll cover a little bit more later in the slideshow. However, Ethereum would suffer other attacks during the Homestead phase. They had several denial of service attacks, and basically this prompted 2 upgrades, and this was called Tangerine Whistle and Spurious Dragon. So now in October of 2017, Ethereum rolled out with the Metropolis phase. While this phase was also addressing security concerns, Buterin and his team wanted to focus on scalability. However, this was not an easy task. The process was so complex that it had to be executed in 2 steps, and those were actually named Byzantium and Constantinople. The end result was a lighter and more efficient experience for developers and users. So now we're going to enter the last phase, which was started in January of 2020, and this is called the Serenity phase, and it's still in development at this moment. But their ultimate goal is to improve on enhanced capabilities like a more robust security, and scalability is a really important one. So the official release date has yet to be determined, but Ethereum 2.0 will be a vast improvement from 1.0. On a side note, with the success of Ethereum, Buterin is the youngest crypto billionaire in the world. He currently has 333,521 shares of Ether, which is worth about $1.3 billion. So now we'll talk about the blockchain solutions.
Blockchain comes up with a green solution. Proof of work is a way of describing how each new block is created on the chain. And using this method, specially designed computers race to solve an immensely complex math problem. And although this method is extremely secure, it uses large amounts of energy, which in turn contribute to pollution around the world. And after years of research into an alternative proof of work system, The possible solution would be proof of stake. So, proof of stake does not use any computing power and it does not attempt to solve any complex problems. So, the main draw behind the proof of stake system lies in the fact that it should be even more secure than proof of work and it also uses exponentially less energy. So, brief history of scams and thefts. In this, we'll be talking about the negative surroundings of blockchain technology. So back in 2010, on online site traditionally used to price and trade where Magic, the Gathering trading cards, became one of the very first digital Bitcoin exchanges. And later in 2014, the site was hacked and about $450 million. And none of the funds were ever recovered. So shortly after this hack, the website founders found themselves in bankruptcy court while the Bitcoin exchanges closed its doors for good. Next, we have the Ethereum attack. So Ethereum experienced a scandal about a year after their launch that would change their trajectory. Unfortunately, the Ethereum blockchain was compromised and $60 million were stolen. And now the creators had to decide, should they leave the hack alone or should they exercise central power and recover the stolen funds using code written into the system? Ethereum's creator decided that the funds needed to be recovered, and after a blowout disagreement with the rest of his team, Ethereum was split into two separate blockchains. The original compromised blockchain, now referred to as Ethereum Classic, and a new blockchain simply called Ethereum. So even today, there are influencers and online personalities promoting cryptocurrencies on their platforms because there are no regulations like there would be in traditional stock markets. These influencers then turn around and sell their holdings for a profit, oftentimes leaving their followers with worthless coins while the promoters and creators of the coins walk away with the pockets full. So always be wary when investing. Pump and dump schemes are abundant in this space, and occasionally even the influencers themselves are tricked into promoting a scam. So it pays to be careful whenever thinking about investments. So where do we use blockchain technology today? So blockchain technology is becoming more mainstream and many people are using it from governments, businesses, companies to the people who have a phone. So the three major ways we use this is banking, financing, business, and the government. So for banking and financing, one way we can all relate to this is having to send money to your friends or family. So today we would use Venmo or PayPal to send money, but there are many restrictions to these, like the fees, your vulnerability to hackers, etc. However, by having this blockchain technology with its aforementioned benefits, it could fix this problem. And for businesses, another major use of this technology would be companies like Amazon. So they would use this by having it used for tasks such as real time tracking of your goods or allocating your goods to different shipping containers. Another business that uses this is healthcare. So they would use this by organizing their data information like age, gender, medical history data, and this just allows them to have data stored on their shared blockchain and it gives them easier access without having any undue privacy concerns. And lastly, the government. So they use this to make it easier to store their records and to have access to the records. So they would use this to record and store their citizens' individual records like their birth dates, their martial status, property transfers. So managing data can be sometimes harder for these governments because some places have hard copies still, and it may be time consuming for people to physically have to retrieve their records. So by having this blockchain, it makes it easier for them to organize, access it, and even make it more secure. And another way they use it is for voting and taxes. So for voting processes, it just makes it more easily accessible, and it improves their security. And then for taxes, as we all know, filing taxes can be time consuming and stressful. So by having this, it makes it more efficient, and it's easier to store. So overall, the blockchain technology is becoming more and more used today, and although it is helping to make everything more efficient and safe, it also has its downfalls of making things more vulnerable to hackers, scams, and thefts. But today we are continuing to improve on our technology. Overall, the blockchain technology is not perfect. It does have its downfalls, like making it more vulnerable to hackers, scammers, and theft, but it is improving and advancing to help us make things more efficient, safe, and more secure.
And last but not least, to close out the presentation, here is a list of all the references we used for our account in the 21st Century History book. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.